For years, I thought nothing at the dinner table could surprise me anymore. We had shared everything around it: birth announcements, graduations, job changes, even heartbreaks. But that evening, as we sat down to a simple family meal, my granddaughter asked a question that stopped every fork and knife mid-air. I had no idea her words would unlock something inside me that I had kept quiet for decades. Before I tell you what happened, let me ask you, where are you watching us from tonight? I love knowing which cities and towns our stories travel to, because it makes me feel like we're sitting at one big table together. The night started so normally. I had set the table with my old china, the plates with the faint blue flowers around the edges, the ones my mother gave me when I first married. The smell of roasted chicken and garlic butter filled the room, mixing with the faint sweetness of apple pie cooling on the counter. My son, his wife, and my granddaughter had arrived earlier that afternoon, bringing with them the kind of noise and energy that makes a house feel alive. At 60, I've learned to treasure those sounds. I live alone now, and silence has a way of pressing in on you like an unwanted visitor. So when my granddaughter, Lily, came running into the kitchen with her bright eyes and messy hair, asking if she could set the napkins, I let her. I watched as her small hands carefully folded each napkin, even if they ended up lopsided. There was something tender about the way she tried to imitate the order and grace of the adults, even as she was still very much a child. We sat together, me at one end, my son at the other, his wife and Lily in between. There was laughter about how overcooked the carrots were, talk about my son's long work days, and Lily proudly describing the art project she'd been working on at school. It felt warm, ordinary, the kind of dinner you'd want to wrap up and save for later when life feels too lonely. But then it happened. Out of nowhere, Lily put down her fork and looked at me with those steady eyes only children seem to have. "Grandma," she said, "are you happy?" The room fell silent. My son cleared his throat. My daughter-in-law tried to smile, but I could feel the weight of that question sink into my chest like a stone. Children don't ask things like that lightly, and certainly not in front of everyone. I opened my mouth, ready to brush it off with some polite little answer, something like, "Of course I'm happy, sweetheart," but the words stuck in my throat. Because the truth was I happy? I could feel my fingers tightening around the edge of my napkin, the threads rough against my skin. I glanced at my son, who suddenly looked uncomfortable, and at his wife, who shifted in her seat. But Lily just waited, her eyes fixed on me, unblinking. Memories started to rise up in my mind. Quiet evenings in the house after my husband passed, mornings where the only voice I heard was my own, days filled with routine but little joy. There were happy moments, yes. My garden in spring, the smell of fresh coffee, the occasional visit from friends. But was I truly happy? That was something I hadn't allowed myself to ask in a long, long time. I finally managed to speak. My voice was softer than I intended. "That's a big question, sweetheart." Lily leaned closer. "But are you?" She pressed, her innocence cutting through all the layers I had carefully built around myself. And in that moment, something shifted. I realized she wasn't just asking because she was curious. She was asking because she cared, because she noticed things the adults in the room didn't bother to. She saw me not just as grandma who made pie and folded laundry, but as a person with feelings, with a story, with an inner life. The room felt charged, like we were all holding our breath. My son finally said, "Mom, you don't have to answer that right now." But it was too late. The question had already cracked something open. I smiled at Lily, though my eyes felt wet. "I think that's something I need to think about," I told her. And I meant it. Dinner went on, the clinking of silverware returning slowly, cautiously. But my mind was elsewhere, turning that simple question over and over. I knew I couldn't just let it go, because when a child you love looks you in the eye and asks if you're happy, you owe them the truth, even if you're not ready to face it yourself. That night, long after they had gone to bed, I stood alone in the quiet kitchen. The pie sat half-eaten on the counter, and the shadows stretched across the tiled floor. I touched the back of a chair and whispered her words to myself again. Are you happy? It was the beginning of something I didn't expect, a journey that would change not just me, but the way my family saw me, the way I saw myself. I didn't sleep much after they went to bed. The house made those night sounds I used to find comforting, the soft hum of the refrigerator, the clock's steady click, and all I heard in them was the question echoing back to me. Are you happy? At 5:30, I gave up pretending and turned on the kitchen light. The room looked tired in that early gray, like it hadn't quite decided to wake up. I set the kettle on, took out my favorite mug, the one with the chipped rim, and reached for a pen and a pad I keep beside the phone. Without thinking, I wrote, "What does happy look like now?" Steam curled up like a small flag of surrender. I stood there for a long time, listening to the kettle begin its whisper, then its rush. If you'd asked me years ago, I could have told you easily. Happy was a Saturday at the lake with my husband, a red scarf I used to wear knotted in my hair, our sun splashing at the shoreline. Happy was the sound of screen doors, the smell of sunscreen and orange peels, snapshots lined up on the dresser like proof. Somewhere along the way, Happy had become quieter, a steady "I'm fine" that no one questioned, least of all me. By 7, the house started to stir. I heard small feet, and then Lily appeared in the doorway with a blanket around her shoulders, hair sticking out like fireworks. "Morning, Grandma," she said, and climbed onto a chair, as if she always belonged there. I poured hot water over a tea bag for her and watched the color bloom. "About last night," she said, too casually for a 9-year-old. I turned, surprised at her bravery. "You don't have to apologize for being curious." She shook her head. "I'm not sorry. I was thinking about my school project. We're supposed to ask someone a big question." Her eyes searched my face, worried she'd done damage she didn't mean to do. "Did I do something wrong?" "No," I said, and felt that single word open something in me. "You gave me a gift." She smiled the way children do when they realize they haven't broken the world after all. "Do you want to come outside and check your tomatoes? Dad says they're the size of baseballs." We went out into the backyard, the grass still damp and cool under our shoes. The vines had indeed gone wild, shouldering themselves up and over the wire cages, bright pendants of red and gold hanging like ornaments. I handed Lily the small colander, and we filled it together, her fingers brushing mine as carefully as if the fruit could bruise on contact. "You can ask me anything," I told her, "even the big things." "Are you happy?" she whispered again, though this time there was no test in it, only concern. I thought of the paper in the kitchen with my question. I thought of the years I had answered on behalf of everyone else. Dinner, bills, doctor appointments, all the daily stewardship of a family. "I'm learning how to be," I said. "Does that make sense?" "It does," she said, and nodded with such seriousness that I had to laugh. By the time we went in, my son was at the table rubbing sleep from his face, his wife fussing with the coffee machine. He glanced at me like we shared a secret and didn't know if we should say it out loud. "Mom," he started, then stopped. "About last night." "I've been thinking too," I said. We moved around each other, the way families do, passing plates and napkins, bumping elbows gently. At last he sat, hands folded like a man about to give a speech to himself. "I wasn't sure if I should step in," he admitted. "I didn't want to. Pry. "You've never been a prior," I said, and we both smiled at the clumsy word. "But I think I've made it too easy for everyone to assume I'm okay. I've been answering a question no one asked." He stared at his coffee. "I've been busy," he said quietly, shame sneaking into his voice. "Work, the house." I should have asked. You would think the next words would come like a river, but they didn't. They came like a trickle through dry ground. "I'm lonely sometimes," I said. "Not because of you, not because of anyone, just because the roles changed and I forgot to come along." No one moved. The truth sat in the middle of the table like a fifth-place setting. Lily reached out and put her hand on my wrist, as if I were the one who needed the reassurance now. "I want to find new things," I said, surprising myself as I said it. "I used to paint, you know, and I've been thinking about the community center down on Maple. They have a pottery studio. Maybe I could try that. Get my hands dirty again." My son let out a breath I didn't know he was holding. "I'll drive you," he said, then laughed at himself. "Or better, text me when you want company, and I'll make it happen. Every other Thursday. We'll call it Mom's Class Night." It wasn't grand, but it was sturdy. A small routine that could become a bridge. I nodded. Every other Thursday. We cleared the dishes in a hush that wasn't heavy anymore. It felt like the air after a summer storm, washed, a little brighter. When the sink was empty, I found myself at the hall closet where we keep odds and ends. Behind an old beach umbrella was a box I hadn't opened in years. Inside lay my brushes in a stiff sleeve and a photograph I'd forgotten about, me at the lake in that red scarf, squinting into the sun, a smear of blue paint on my knuckle. My husband had taken it the day we decided the house with the long porch would be ours. On the back, in his handwriting, he'd written, "Look where you shine." I sat on the floor and cried in a way that was not undoing but stitching. My son found me, lowered himself down clumsily, and let me lean against his shoulder, the way he had leaned against mine after heartbreaks and bicycles and the noisier hurts of childhood. It felt strange and right to be held by your child and not be the one doing the holding. "I miss him," I said. "Me too," he answered. "But I see him sometimes, in how you look at us, in your stubbornness." He nudged my knee with his. "In your tomatoes." We laughed, and the laughter didn't crack. It rang steady. Later, when the house calmed and Lily sprawled on the rug with markers, I went to get the mail. The sun had burned off the morning haze, and the street was awake with sprinklers, and someone's radio tuned to oldies. At the box, I ran into Mr. Whittaker from 2 doors down, retired history teacher, widower, the kind of neighbor who knows the garbage schedule by heart. He tipped his cap in that gallant, old-fashioned way he has. "Morning, Margaret," he said. "Smelled your pie last night. Thought the whole block might wander over." "You should have," I told him. We had plenty. He held up a flyer. "You know they've put the schedule for the community center in the mail? I'll be helping with the local history club, if they can tolerate me. Says here there's a pottery open studio on Thursdays." He tapped the page, the way teachers emphasize without scolding. "You ever tried something like that?" "I have," I said, and surprised myself again. "I think I'm going back." He smiled, not with pity or surprise, but with respect. "Well then, maybe I'll see you there." Back inside, I dialed the number on the flyer. A woman named Denise answered, her voice brisk and kind. "Yes, Thursday nights. Yes, beginner's welcome. Bring an apron and a willingness to fail beautifully," she joked. I signed up. The moment I hung up, the house felt different, as if I'd cracked a window I didn't know was painted shut. That evening, when we sat down to leftovers, Lily looked at me with the same clear eyes, and I answered her without being asked. "I did something brave today," I said. "I signed up for a class." "Is that happy?" she asked. "It's a start," I said, "and starts are very close to happy." We bowed our heads, each in our own way, each with our own silent words. Then we ate, forks moving, the ordinary music of a family that had just told the truth and found it didn't break them. Outside, the late light stretched across the yard and made the tomatoes glow. I felt the day settle in my bones, not as a weight, but as a promise. The following Thursday came faster than I expected. I stood in front of my closet longer than I should have, debating what to wear to a pottery class. It felt silly, but I wanted to look like I belonged, like I hadn't been hiding from new experiences for years. In the end, I settled on a soft blue blouse and an old denim jacket, simple, comfortable, but with a little bit of myself stitched in. When my son pulled up to drive me, he honked twice and waved from the car like he used to in high school, when he'd rush me to his basketball games. I laughed and shook my head, realizing how easily roles can reverse. The community center smelled faintly of dust and paint, the kind of smell that carries both history and possibility. Inside, I found the pottery room buzzing with quiet energy. Wheels hummed, hands pressed into clay, and there was a rhythm to it, like a song no one had to teach. Denise, the woman who had taken my call, greeted me with a smile that was as warm as fresh bread. She handed me a smock and guided me to a wheel. My hands trembled at first. The clay was cool and sticky, resisting me, as if it knew I was a beginner. Denise leaned over and said, "Don't fight it. Just listen." So I did. I pressed gently, turned slowly, and watched as a lopsided bowl began to take shape. It wasn't much to look at, but it was mine. Across the room, I noticed Mr. Whittaker, my neighbor, sitting with a group at the history table. He gave me a little wave when he caught my eye, and I felt strangely anchored by it, like having a familiar face in a sea of newness. When class ended, Denise encouraged us to sign our work. I hesitated, then carefully etched M at the bottom of my uneven bowl. It felt like leaving a small piece of myself in the clay, proof that I had shown up. Back at home, Lily ran to meet me at the door. "How was it, Grandma?" "Did you make something amazing?" I laughed and held out the small, awkward bowl. "Well, it's not perfect, but it's a start." She cradled it in her hands like it was treasure. "It's beautiful," she said, her voice sincere in a way only children can manage. "Can I put it on my desk?" That night, after everyone had gone to bed, I sat by the window with the lights off. Outside, the street was quiet, the lamppost casting its familiar glow. I thought about how fragile beginnings can be, how easily we talk ourselves out of trying. And yet, there I was, with clay still under my fingernails, with a little bowl drying in my granddaughter's room, with something new stirring in my chest. I'd whispered to myself, almost afraid of how true it felt. Maybe happy starts small.